Welcome to San Diego Integral, November 12th, 2022. Our topic for today, responding effectively in times of crisis, debugging the source code of our crises and craziness, presented by Roger Walsh.
Welcome to San Diego Integral. I'm Tom Habib, and I'm a member of the San Diego Integral's leadership team, and I'll be your host tonight. We have an exciting presentation tonight. It's, as you know, it's Roger Walsh, responding effectively in times of crises, debugging the source code of our crises and craziness. We'll begin shortly, but I first want to mention that we will be recording this meeting. The link for the recording will be posted on the meetup posts in a couple of days, so watch for that. We're also going to post it on YouTube to make access easier. If you prefer not to be seen, you can turn off your camera, although we do like to see you and have you interact with us. Also, you can find our event information on the website, sandiegointegral.org, and on the Meetup and Facebook pages. Those links are on the website. Please join one of these groups if you haven't already, and that way you'll be automatically notified when an event is added. If you have any questions or comments about our meetings, you're welcome to contact one of the members of the leadership team, who you can identify as the people with the co-host next to their name. Next month, on December 10th at 4 p.m., we have John Kessler, and that talk will be using integral polarity practice to thrive. Finally, we invite you to make a small donation to help cover meetup fees and future equipment needs. You can make that donation if you choose sandiegointegral.org. A few housekeeping details. We're going to have a question and answer session. You can either unmute your mic or ask the question in the chat, or by raising your hand. If you're on a laptop or desktop, this button is at the lower edge of your screen. If you're on a phone or tablet, you may need to touch the screen to activate the menu at the bottom, and you can find it on the More. We also have a chat host today who will be checking the chat for questions. You can add any questions you have right there also. Right after the meeting, we'll have an informal social segment for 30 to 60 minutes where we discuss what happened today, and we can do some Q&A if that is your preference. So before we start, we would like to take a few moments to welcome newcomers. If you can unmute yourself and say your name, where you're calling in from, what city and town, and how you heard about San Diego Integral, that will be much appreciated. So who's the brave first newcomer to go first?
Hi.
Hi, Kelly.
Yeah, so my name's Kelly Edwards. Hi. This is my first meetup. I'm calling in from Australia. It's Sunday morning here, and yeah, I went to the What's the Future conference last week, and so that's how I heard about it, through Eli. Thank you.
Welcome aboard, Kelly, from down under.
Thank
Who else
you.
is new? Jess, are you new?
No, not new. Just haven't been around in a while. I've been to your house a few times.
Where are you calling from?
La Mesa. Local.
Welcome back.
Thanks.
I don't recognize Nicholas, but that he may or may not have joined us before, but if you wanted to introduce yourself.
Hi, yeah, I'm not new. I just drop in every couple of years. I'm kind of like a comet, I just, cyclical visit. I'm in Encinitas. I too have been to the house once or twice, but it was back in the day, let's put it that way. Nice to be back.
Welcome back.
Saeed, why don't you introduce yourself since you're a dignitary in this community?
Thank you, Tom. Far from being a dignitary in the community, I've just been absent the last few years. But my name is Saeed, and I come to Integral from the spiral dynamics side of the equation, or family, or model, or however you want to call it. Glad to be here. Seen Roger's presentation, and I know how much he's been a part of the Integral community, and I'm very excited to be here and hook up with everybody and see so many familiar faces. So thank you for welcoming me again. I have 2 registrations now, one that happened yesterday and one that goes back about 10 years ago. So if I were you, I would refer to the old one. So thanks for having me.
Saeed. Anyone else?
My name's Beth. I'm in Boulder, Colorado.
Hi, Beth.
Hi, I'm new. My name's Amanda, and I'm here with Kabir in San Diego, and he has roped me into this. Happy to be here.
Welcome aboard. Anyone else? Okay. Okay, I think we're ready. Kathleen, take it away.
So today we have with us the esteemed Roger Walsh. Roger Walsh's journey has included earning advanced degrees, MD, PhD, DHL, Doctor of Humane Letters from Australia's Queensland University. Many may not know that he came to the United States as a Fulbright scholar. In the States, he became a professor of psychiatry, philosophy, and advanced anthropology at the University of California, Irvine, which I'm in here in Newport Beach, so he's just that is about a couple minutes away, but apparently he's calling in from Mill Valley. He's written 5 books, including the well-known, many people's favorite, Essential Spirituality, and countless integral and transpersonal scholarly journal articles, which have received over 20 national and international awards. In his misspent youth, many of us now wish we had sort of a misspent youth, but in his misspent youth, he held the world high diving record and worked as a circus acrobat. Recently, he graduated from the San Francisco Comedy College and then had an extremely brief and unsuccessful career as a stand-up comedian, no doubt adding to his vulnerability that he writes into his bios. Together with John Dupuy, he is co-host of the Integral podcast, Deep Transformation, Self-Society Spirit, which is ranked among the top 5% of English language podcasts. We introduce to you Roger Walsh.
Well, thank you very much, Kathleen and Tom. And thank you for the opportunity of being with your community. I've known of you for quite some time, but never participated. Maybe I'll become more of a regular. Sounds fun. And some of you, I think, yes, Kelly, we were at the conference together. So nice to see you, and also another fellow Australian. So, all right. So, the title is of what I want to talk about today is how do we respond effectively in times of crisis, which we're certainly in, and how do we get at the root causes of our crises and work at that down at that level, which I is titled as Debugging the Source Code of Our Crises and Craziness. And we're all aware that we're in a race between consciousness and catastrophe, and tragically, the catastrophes just keep multiplying. And there's a very real possibility that we could even face, the collapse of our beloved civilization, a catastrophe which would dwarf anything in human history and consign, would doom billions and leave the remainder scrabbling for survival. But And there are people who take this, people respond to this challenge in various ways. Of course, there's a large number of people, probably not a majority any longer, who respond with denial and apathy. And then the people who acknowledge these challenges respond on a spectrum of pessimism to optimism, from what are called the doomers and the deep adaptationists on the pessimistic scale, saying it's hopeless, or deep adaptation, all we can do now is try to adapt ourselves to what's coming, all the way through to the optimists who, of course, for example, the techno-utopians or solar punk, or a variety of other terms. But the important point is that the outcome is not preordained. In fact, it is still really unknown. And no matter how bad our challenges, it's our responses that will decide both their consequence and our fate. And if that's so, it raises one of the most important questions of our time and of all time, which is, how can we contribute most effectively so as to reduce these and heal these risks? And I suspect that everyone in this community is wrestling with this question. How can we respond most effectively? What can we do? And I suspect it tugs at us, if not daily, then very frequently. And it's a central rationale for our coming together today. So I want to point to some answers, but not preset ones, not my answers. I want to raise some questions and some principles, some information, which will guide each of us to discover our own unique answers and our own deepest and most effective contributions. And to do this, I invite you to ponder 4 questions and 10 principles. And the first question is the one that we're all wrestling with. What can I do? How can I help? And it's a beautiful question, because that very question, what can I do? How can I help? Opens us to the suffering in the world and our own desire to alleviate it. And it's that defenseless opening to suffering which gives birth to compassion, and the compassion which motivates us to inquire most deeply and feel most deeply into the most skillful responses. But to do this, we need to acknowledge what kind of question this is, because there are 2 very different kinds of questions. There are knowledge questions and there are wisdom questions. Knowledge questions are simple factual data questions. Is it, what's the temperature? Look at the thermostat, you have your answer, end of question. But wisdom questions are more like koans. They're questions which each time you ask them have the potential for taking you deeper into the question, deeper into yourself, and deeper into life. And the question, what can I do, is a wisdom question. There's no final answer. It's a question that hopefully each of us will be asking for the rest of our lives. And each time we do, it has the potential for opening new perspectives, new possibilities, new depths of understanding and skillfulness of response. These questions, this question and the other 3 questions I want to pose, I said there's something like koans, and they're actually a specific kind of koan, a koan being a Zen question, which is transconceptual. It's designed to challenge the intellect so much that we open to a transconceptual awareness or a deep intuitive knowing that is beyond the intellect. And so these questions are what are called Genji koans, and they're koans that arise out of life itself. They're the fundamental questions that life poses to us. So they're wisdom questions. And the second question, beyond what can I do, is something that makes the koan very specific to us. And it's the question, what do I feel called to contribute? What do I feel called to contribute? And this is an important complementary question because it recognizes that each of us is especially sensitive to some forms of suffering and inspired by some kind of actions and has certain skills and skills. So it's the question of what calls us. We're far more likely to feel energized and impassioned by responses that call and inspire us. So each of us is asked to feel into, to open to our unique call. And it's associated with the recognition that service doesn't have to be sacrifice. It's okay to have a good time. You're contributing. That took me a long time to learn that, actually. My late wife taught me that one. So, why do you think this has to be so serious? Lighten up. People are much more likely to be inspired if you're not so heavy about it. So the third question, what's the most strategic thing I can do? That's deeper still than what can I do? Now we're looking at what's the most strategic thing I can do? What kind of contribution will leverage my unique situation and talents and skills and connections so as to make the most effective contribution I can make? What we're looking for is our way of what Buckminster Fuller called trim tabbing. And most of you probably know the concept of trim tabbing, but trim tab is a little rudder on a big rudder. If you look at a 747, those huge jumbo jets, they have a huge rudder, and there's no way you can use mechanical pressure or leverage to turn that rudder when it's moving at 500 miles an hour. But if you notice at the back of the rudder, there's a little rudder. So you move the little rudder, which is called the trim tab, one way, the big rudder moves the other way, and the whole plane turns just by applying a small amount of pressure at the right place. And Archimedes, the famous ancient Greek inventor, stated, well, he said, give me a place to stand and a lever long enough, and I will move the world. That's what we're looking for. Our place to stand and leverage the impact of our contribution so as to move the world. And to do this requires us to recognize the deep roots or the source code of our crises and our craziness so as to recognize what truly helps. And that's one of the things we'll want to be getting into shortly. And then there's a fourth and the deepest of all questions, or the most enduring. And it's the question, how can I live my life so as to be an optimal instrument of service? How can I live my life so as to be an optimal instrument of service? This is a lifelong question. Now we're looking not just for a single contribution at a particular time, but for a lifetime of contribution. And this means not only recognizing our most strategic contribution now, but also cultivating and honing our capacities during our lifetime so as to see more clearly, act more effectively, and respond more strategically. I like to call this the Buckminster Fuller game. Because Bucky Fuller, as I'm sure you all know, was one of the world's greatest inventors. And I think he patented something like, 1,000 plus things. But he wasn't always that successful. And I think around his early 30s, he was in a deep depression and despair. I think he'd lost a child in infancy. His business had failed, and he was seriously contemplating suicide. And the story goes that he stood one day on a bridge and asked himself what would make life worth living. And the answer he came up with was seeing how much good one person can do. And it was that insight, which he said he heard like a voice, that gave him his lifelong inspiration. That was his Genji koan. How much good can one person do? And it was that which gave meaning and purpose to his life and enabled him to go on to be one of the most prolific inventors of the 20th century. So now we have a context. We have these 4 questions. What can I do? What do I feel called to do? What's the most strategic thing I can do? And finally, how can I live my life so as to be an optimal instrument of service? And what I'd like to do now is to invite you to do a guided meditation. And what I'll do, I'll invite you to evoke or open to certain experiences. And then when you have that opening, that open state of mind, which I'll guide you into, then I'll ask a couple of questions. And I just encourage you to not to try and figure out an answer, but to trust your own deeper wisdom, your own transconceptual wisdom, your own insight, understanding, intuition. And okay, so I invite you to just take a few slow, deep breaths. Deep breath. And breathe in and just let go. And you might, I want to keep the back relatively straight and just breathe in and let go. And that's letting go with each exhalation, the body, mind can become more relaxed. And you've already discovered one of the great secrets of relaxation, which is relaxation isn't something you do, it's something you allow. So breathe in and let go. And I invite you to notice your awareness filling your body. Notice the awareness throughout your body, aware of each part of the body, from head to toe, from one left-hand fingers to right-hand fingers, neck, head, filled with awareness. And notice that you also have an awareness of the environment outside you. And you also have an awareness of the world. It's a background awareness, but you have that awareness. And bring your attention back to the body and notice again the awareness in the body. And now notice the body in awareness. Notice that the body, your experience of the body, is actually in awareness. The experience of the body arises within awareness. And notice the environment within awareness. Your experience of the environment is also within awareness. And notice that your experience of the world is also in awareness. All experience arises within awareness. a world withheld gently, lovingly in your awareness. Just be aware of your experience of the world, gently held, lovingly held within your awareness. As you hold the world in awareness, what do you feel called to contribute? As you hold the world in awareness, what do you feel called to contribute? And as you hold the world in loving awareness, what could you do to live your life so as to be an optimal instrument of service? As you hold the world in loving awareness, what could you do so as to be an optimal instrument of service? And is there something you could do during our meeting or even right now to begin becoming a more effective instrument of service? Perhaps a decision, perhaps a perspective. Is there something you could do during our gathering or right now to begin becoming a more effective instrument of service? Beautiful. And when you're ready, we'll let your awareness come back to our community. Welcome back. And is there anyone who'd like to or be willing to share, give us the gift of any insight or recognitions you had? If so, it would be a gift to us all. Please, Joanne.
It would be for me to, I listen for a living as a therapist, to listen outside the therapy session to everybody that I come into contact with, anywhere, on the phone, at business, as human beings, to listen with love.
Beautiful. So bringing those listening skills you've cultivated in your therapeutic work into each interaction. Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, you remind me of Thich Nhat Hanh's monastery, where if you call the monastery, it takes a while before anyone picks up. And what's happening at the other end is someone is taking 3 breaths so they can be really present with you when they pick up the phone. It's like, oh, that's nice. Maybe I should be present too. Oh. Yeah, thanks, Joanne.
Hey, Roger, I'll share a quick, because I've been reading your stuff, and
oh, bless you.
and so my act of service was to put your questions in the chat, so that everybody could see what the questions are. So I was a step ahead there accidentally.
Oh, great. Thank you.
What strikes me, Roger, is how can I be the most strategic? That may not be immediately apparent as we consider these points. That might take some thought. Is that reasonable?
Oh, I'm so glad you brought that up because I should have. Thank you, Tom. Yeah. One of the things that has struck me about wise people is as they look into questions like this is they take time to reflect. And I should have said exactly what you indicated, Tom, that one of the differences, another difference between knowledge question and wisdom question is with knowledge questions, you can have an answer like that. But wisdom questions, it may require a long incubation period. And I think for me, there was a book I wrote quite some time back, The Psychology of Human Survival. And it was really when, the Cold War was still going, and I was just horrified to think we could blow ourselves off the face of the planet. I was really looking for what could I do, and took I think a better part of 2 years before I realized, okay, I could write on the psychological sources of this conflict and make a contribution in that way. So it really took wrestling. It takes wrestling with these questions for a while. And thank you so much for emphasizing that, Tom. Yeah.
Roger, I share a response.
Please.
To
Oh, Kabir, hi.
Hi, nice to see you.
Nice to see you again. Kabir and I know each other from Dan Brown's meditation trainings. Great to see you again, Kabir.
You're just glowing. It's really wonderful to see you too. And it really, it's that source I heard you drawing from in the placing the world in our awareness. And that's really kind of felt so gently enjoined by you as a friend on the path to ask that question, what can I do right now to be more a being of service? And it really was that. As you took us through the meditation, the sense of being of service to that whole world and cosmos in awareness was about realizing the kind of living full activity of love in all dimensions and respects. And so the action that for me could translate into this room here together today was about staying aware of that room and self and cosmos in awareness and not falling back into the awareness in the world only mention of that, so that I could be more fully present and fully capable of that realized experience of love in every moment, in every instance.
Beautiful. Yeah, thank you. And you're making me realize, Kabir, that I should have added something even more, that as Tom said, these are wisdom questions, and it can take really a gestation period of sitting with them, wrestling with them, opening to them before insights come. And then what you're pointing to, some of the insights may be of qualities and capacities we need to develop, and that, of course, can take time too. So to realize these visions and stabilize them. So yeah, thank you very much. Okay, so we have these 4 questions, these wisdom questions, and wisdom questions to summarize Tom and Kabir. One of the things we need with wisdom questions is patience, and so we have these questions. Now I want to suggest several principles that it's really valuable to know in order to contribute effectively. And I'm going to walk us through 10 principles which kind of build one on another and complement one another and take us to some certain conclusions about what really strategic contributions look like. Okay, and the deepest contributions look like. All right. So, and these 10 principles offer a big picture integral context for understanding our current dilemmas, unearthing their roots, and revealing deep strategic responses. So the first principle is that all civilizations, not just ours, but all civilizations, face recurrent threats and require creative responses. All civilizations face recurrent threats and require creative responses. Yes, we have COVID, we have nuclear weapons, we have overpopulation, ecological pollution. We have some major challenges. However, they're novel variations of a recurring story. And the recurring story is that civilizations require enormous energy and ingenuity to first create, but then to maintain. You know, entropy is relentless. So there are always disintegrative or forces or challenges to the integrity and growth of civilizations. And as the historian Arnold Toynbee pointed out, civilizations, any civilization confronts multiple challenges over time, and each new challenge must be met and requires a novel response from what he called a creative minority. This is the small group of people, quite small sometimes at first, who first recognize a new threat, innovate solutions, and then inspire the conventional majority to recognize the threat and adopt the solutions. So the creative minority is the first to recognize, to innovate, and to inspire. And that's what we're looking for, how we can play our part as a creative minority to respond effectively. So that's a general principle. That's putting our challenges in a far bigger historical global context. Now, if we are trying to be part of this creative minority, and actually there are multiple creative minorities, there are many different types of responses that we need at this time. But let's call ourselves the integral creative minority. And if we're encouraging people to recognize the major threat to themselves, the major threats to themselves, to our society and our civilization, we'd better know how people usually respond to threat. And so the second principle we need to be aware of is how people respond to threat. And the fact is, under threat, people tend to regress psychologically. That's the default response. But they can be encouraged and given the means by which they can not regress, but progress and grow and lean into the challenge and contribute. But sadly, the default response to threat of any kind is often psychological regression and falling back into less mature, more constricted ways of thinking and acting. And thus people may well become more egocentric and ethnocentric, defensive. They may contract into a kind of tunnel vision and adopt short-term black and white, us versus them thinking. That's an easy default. Not everyone does it, but a significant number, the majority do it at least at first. It's just a defensive reaction. We all do it to some extent. But the good news is that given the right support, people can grow, respond effectively and grow even in the face of threat. And we all know stories of people in horrendous situations like concentration camps who somehow rise to it and instead of being ground down, are polished up by the tragic circumstances. So if we to give people support, what's the right kind of support? And the research shows that it offers three things: a context or a way of understanding, a purpose, and a means, a way people can respond. So those are the three things that help people do a judo move towards responding effectively and growthfully to and helpfully to challenges. A context or way of understanding, a purpose to inspire them, and a means or a way they can do it. So a context is a mental framework. It's a way of understanding and making sense of a situation. And there are always multiple possible contexts or interpretations. But the most helpful do three things. They make the challenge understandable, they show people how they can master it, and they inspire them to do so. So one context, just to take an example, for our current civilization threats is the first principle I suggested, that all civilizations face recurrent threats. And what is required is for a creative minority to come forth and see effective responses and inspire people to them. So yeah, that can be translated into something like, yes, resource depletion or ecological disruption or climate change is a major threat. But fortunately, history offers us some guidance because we know that all civilizations face threats, and what they require of us is that we come up with creative solutions and inspire people to adopt them. That's a valuable context because it makes sense of the situation, points to a solution, and provides a purpose. And this strategy of providing a more helpful understanding or interpretation of a challenge is what psychologists call reframing or reattribution, reframing. It's a way of looking at a challenge from a more helpful, inspiring perspective. And as far as I can see, it's the most rapid psychological intervention that's possible. Think about it. Working through defenses takes months of hard work at best. Growing another stage takes on average 5 years. But the strategy of reframing can be done almost instantly. It's just offering, oh, here's another way of looking at things. Of course, it's a skill, but it's a skill we want to develop. That is, what's the most helpful way of looking at this? And it's really crucial to give people a more helpful understanding, something that inspires them, and show them how they can respond. Okay, so we've got this problem. Here are some things that some people are doing. Which one appeals to you? So, or is there one of those that appeals to you? And in that way, we're giving people something they can do, pointing to something they can do, which is crucial because the research shows that if people see other people in need, if they see an easy way to help, they are very likely to. But if they don't see an easy way to help, they're likely to get defensive and blame the victim. Okay, so providing some suggestions, inspiration on how people can respond is very effective. Okay, so stepping back, recapitulating, first general principle, all civilizations face recurrent threats and require creative responses from a creative minority. Second, under threat, people tend to regress, all of us tend to regress, and people with the right context and understanding, and people can be inspired to grow into the challenge. Third general principle: the state of the world reflects the state of our minds. Our technology and science have become so incredibly powerful that we possess almost godlike powers. We can destroy life on Earth. We can now create new life forms. We can make this planet almost uninhabitable, or we have the power to turn it into a virtual paradise. That's the extent of our incredible power. And what that means is our technological power is so great that we have shaped the world in our own image. We now live in the Anthropocene. We are changing the world as a reflection of our activities, individual and collective, which means that the shape of the world is being shaped according to our individual psychologies and collective cultures. And what that means is that the problems, if you look at the world's problems, almost all of them at this time are human created. For the first time in human history, all the great threats to our societies and civilization are human caused. And what that means is that what we call our global problems are actually global symptoms. They are symptoms of our individual and collective psychological neuroses and fears and phobias and dysfunctions and immaturities. And we have become like nuclear giants and technological wizards, while remaining ethical adolescents and wisdom infants. Like the sorcerer's apprentice, we possess enormous power and precious little wisdom, and that imbalance may destroy us. So the state of the world reflects the state of our minds, and our global problems are actually global symptoms. Now there's a complication, and it's the fourth principle. State of the world reflects the state of our mind, and fourth principle, our usual state of mind is immature and dysfunctional. Our usual state of mind is immature and dysfunctional. And this has been a recurrent discovery throughout human history. For somewhere between 2,000 and 3,000 years, the world's contemplative traditions have been telling us that our minds are out of control. As the Bhagavad Gita, the Hindu Bible, puts it, restless the mind is, so strongly shaken in the grip of the senses, gross and grown hard with stubborn desire. Truly I think the wind is no wilder. So our usual mind, as all of us here, I assume, are meditators, so all of us know, how out of control our minds are. And meditation begins to bring them, to tame them a little bit and quieten them. And eventually we make the wonderful discovery that if we simply bring awareness to our own psyche, we discover that the psyche, our psyche, is self-healing, self-actualizing, self-transcending, and self-awakening. All we have to do is bring awareness to it, to explore our experience, and we make this wonderful discovery that we don't have to be at war with our own minds, which is a war you can't escape and can't win, but we can come to peace in and with our own minds. We can befriend our minds. And as they do, they quieten, they become still, they become clear and lucid, just like a body of water, which has frantic waves over it, but when the wind stills, it becomes calm and clear and reflects the entire universe. So the contemplatives have discovered the mind is out of control, and Freud discovered the same thing. Man is not even master in his own house, his own mind, said Freud. And then most recently, the developmental psychologists, of which there are many different kinds now, have discovered wonderful news. And I regard this as one of the greatest discoveries in psychology in the last 50 years, that psychological growth doesn't have to stop when the body stops growing, that the mind can continue to open and heal and grow and mature through successive post-conventional transpersonal stages of cognitive complexity, of ethics, of moral thinking, of emotional maturity, of motivation. We all know Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and on and on. And these developmental psychologists have now mapped multiple post-conventional stages so that what we call normality is looking more and more like a case of unrecognized collective developmental arrest. And that also has one positive implication. If we are these as yet not fully mature people by any means, then there are a lot of implications for that. And the good news is they've found the missing link between apes and civilized humans. It's us. So why are we less than fully mature? Well, a lot of reasons. But one is that we live, to put it in an aphorism, we live in the biggest cult of all, culture. And that what we know about culture is that culture tends to pull, it kind of acts like a development, like a magnet. Whatever the cultural norms are, if you deviate too far from the norm on either side, culture tends to push you back. People tend to push you back. And that the extremes, a legal and penal system, tends to push you back towards the means. And it works developmentally too. Culture acts like a magnet, pulling people up to the conventional level, but it tends to retard growth beyond the conventional into the post-conventional stages. And because post-conventional growth, when you begin to move into post-conventional stages, whether cognitive or moral or whatever, one of the defining characteristics of the early post-conventional stages is that you're now able to, instead of looking through, being identified with and looking through the cultural myths and mores and belief systems and values, you now can become reflective. You can step back, you can disidentify from them, look at them and question them. Is it really true that my country is, the best in all possible ways? Is it really true that men should, or that women have to, et cetera, et cetera? We can look at these cultural assumptions and question them and come to our own considered values and beliefs. We have now become what Robert Keegan called self-authoring. That is, our minds have gone from the stage of the socialized mind to the self-authoring mind. Okay, we are now the author of our own belief systems and values and choices. Okay. All right. And this brings us to principle number 5. And we've seen the bad news. State of the world reflects the state of our minds. The minds are immature, uncontrolled, dysfunctional. Now we get to the goodies. The principle 5 is we can wake up and grow up. Those are some of the central assumptions of the whole integral movement. But we are capable of learning and growing and maturing and healing and awakening. And waking up, and to a certain extent growing up, are the central goals of the world's contemplative traditions. And those goals go by many names. You can call it the Christian salvation or theosis, deification. It can be the Islamic Sufi fana, or annihilation of ego. It can be the Jewish devakut, the cleaving to God, the Buddhist enlightenment, Hindu moksha, the Confucian sagehood, or for the Taoists, the jade pure realm of unity with the Tao. All of these different names, different facets, not saying they're all the same, they're different facets of this infinite jewel of being, consciousness, bliss, Atman, Christ consciousness, etc., etc. But all of them point to the same thing, the realization of our deep nature. So principle 5, we can wake up and grow up. Principle number 6, healing the world calls for healing ourselves. General principle is that our effectiveness in healing the collective trance, and what we've been pointing to with the previous suppositions is that we live in a collective trance or collective cult. Our capacity to help and heal the collective trance is a function of how much we have awoken out of it, how mature we've become, how effectively we've honed our skills. And therefore, and we all know this, therefore an essential step is to work to heal and awaken our own minds so we can more effectively heal and awaken other minds. And with this recognition, we have rediscovered for ourselves, not just as a doctrine to be heard from outside, but an internal self-discovery. We've rediscovered one of humankind's greatest and most encompassing ideals, the Buddhist bodhisattva aspiration. Bodhisattvas are what technically it means enlightening beings. Bodhisattvas are those people who dedicate themselves to awakening and healing and growing as fully as possible in order to most effectively help and heal and awaken others. And even to help and heal and awaken all conscious creatures. It's an incredible ideal, very full. It's boundless in its aspiration for well-being of all. And this, say, contemplatives in general and Buddhists in particular, is the way to help most effectively, heal most deeply, and cure most radically. But as integralists, we will actually want to update and augment the bodhisattva aspiration, which sounds like it has a lot of hubris to update the most inspiring ideal the human mind has ever come up with. But you know, it's a different era. I remember someone asking Ken Wilber once when he was talking about the evolution of consciousness. Well, the interviewer said, well, what can you do that the Buddha couldn't? And Ken said, well, I could drive a car. And along with we have more information and understanding and technology and means. So I want to suggest that we need to update the bodhisattva aspiration in 3 ways. One, we want to explicitly include growing up. That is, that the bodhisattva aspiration, a contemporary expression of that, is no longer just about waking up. It's explicitly also about growing up, about maturing, developing through post-conventional stages. And we want to do that for 2 reasons. One, because it acknowledges the fullness of our potential. And second, because a growing number of people are suggesting that the challenges we face, our global symptoms, are so enormously complex that we're just not cognitively adequate to them. And therefore, that suggests for those of us who have an integral perspective that this is a call to grow up, to enhance our cognitive complexity, to move to more complex stages, to the post-formal operational stages, or the what are called systematic or meta-systematic stages of cognitive maturity. Second way we want to enhance the bodhisattva aspiration is to recognize psychodynamics. That part of the psyche is psychological operations are powerful and defensive and unconscious. And Socrates thought that if we just knew what was the right thing to do, if we could just figure that out with our intellects, then we would automatically do that. Well, Freud made nonsense of that one. It's a nice thought, if only. And yet we all know that just because we know what we should do doesn't mean we do it. So we need to work with our psychological blocks and barriers and defenses and dynamics. Often in the integral world, this is called shadow work, but it's actually more comprehensive than shadow work. Okay. The third way we want to augment, enhance, update the bodhisattva aspiration is to recognize that waking up and growing up don't necessarily reveal cultural biases and limiting beliefs and power dynamics. The Buddha may have been as awake as almost anyone. And yet, the early Buddhist tradition was sexist. Socrates and Aristotle and Plato were two of the greatest geniuses the West has given birth to. And they had no problem with slavery. So being an intellectual genius, or even being awake, or even maturing, doesn't necessarily help us identify cultural biases, limiting beliefs, and power dynamics. Okay, so we have rediscovered the bodhisattva aspiration. We enhance it, we fill it out in 3 additional ways with our contemporary integral knowledge. Principle number 7, this is not a time to play small. Our society is in turmoil, our planet plundered, our civilization at risk. Why would we want to do anything less than heal the deepest roots of our multiple crises? And if that takes becoming a bodhisattva, if that takes making an aspiration for coming to the fullness of our potential and capacities and healing skills, so be it. Now, making a decision not to play small is a wonderful decision, and it may well bring up for us our limiting beliefs and the constrictions and contractions that go with them. Beliefs such as, oh, I could never do that, or I'm too this, or I'm too that, or I don't have the education or the training, or fill in the blanks. Those are our individual limiting beliefs. And it is really important to when they come up, to recognize they are just thoughts that we previously believed. So by recognizing them for what they are, thoughts that we previously accepted unconsciously, we disidentify from them, become free of their limiting power, and are able to open into our own power. Okay, this is not a time to play small. Principle number 8. Effective responses address both symptoms and causes, inner and outer. This is Integral 101. If we're to respond effectively to the many crises careening towards us, we'll need to treat both the symptoms and their underlying causes. In fact, we'll need to treat as many symptoms and causes as possible, because we're dealing with very complex systems and complex problems. Now, there are some common traps here. And one of them, it's one trap, the major trap is, a major conceptual trap is thinking is what I call the single something fallacy. That is assuming that there's just a single problem and it has a single cause. You know, the thing we've got to handle is global warming. Well, we do, but we got some other things we need to handle as well. That's the single problem fallacy. The single cause fallacy is, oh, it's all due to capitalism. Well, maybe, and to a lot of other things as well. And the single solution fallacy. We just need to do this, recycle or whatever. Yeah, we need to recycle, but we need to do more as well. This requires us this appreciation requires us moving into systematic thinking beyond formal operation, which is a linear logic, to systems thinking, which sees how these things interact. And many of you probably read Aldous Huxley's famous utopian novel called Island. And in that novel, the people on the island create a utopia, and someone stumbles onto the island and realizes he's in a utopia and asks the islanders, well, where do you start to create this? And they respond, we start everywhere at once. That's what we're wanting to do. We're wanting to start everywhere at once. Now, obviously, as individuals, we're not going to, we can't do it all. But as a group, as an integral community, as one of the many creative minorities, then we can start everywhere at once. So yes, we need to alleviate poverty and injustice, pollution and violence. However, we also need to simultaneously address both the outer systemic causes as well as their often overlooked inner psychological and cultural causes and pathologies, which keep creating the outer crises. If we don't do that, we're just responding to symptoms and not handling the underlying causes, and the problems will keep reappearing just as they have throughout history. The goal is to foster healthier, more mature, more capable individuals, as well as saner, more mature societies to support them. And these are what are now being called meta-modern societies, societies which take as major goals enhancing the psychological well-being and maturity of their citizens. Robert Keegan, the developmental psychologist who famously provided a map of complexity, introduced the idea of deliberately developmental organizations. That is, he looked at those organizations, and there are a few now, which take as one of their goals enhancing the growth of all the people in the organization. And what we need now are, yes, we need deliberately developmental organizations, but we also need deliberately developmental societies and a deliberately developmental civilization. That's what we desperately need now. Okay, so we've laid out these 8 principles, and now I'd like to invite you to a guided meditation. So I invite you to just relax and take a few deep breaths. So some deep breaths. Keeping the back relatively straight and just allowing each out breath to be an act of letting go. And I invite you to reflect for a moment on these challenges we're facing and these principles. And to reflect on what does not playing small mean for you? What would it mean to acknowledge and grow into the fullness of your being and potentials and capacities? What would that look like for you? And is there a strength or capacity of heart or mind that you feel you need in order to be a more effective instrument of healing? Is there a capacity of heart or mind that you feel you need in order to become an optimal instrument of for the welfare and awakening and healing of all? And your psyche will suggest that strength or capacity or virtue that you feel you need. You've become aware of it by now. What's that strength or capacity or virtue that would enable you to become a more effective healer and awakener? And I invite you to think of someone who embodies this and exemplifies this quality. It could be someone you know, could be someone you've heard of, could be a historical figure or an archetype. Think of someone who embodies and exemplifies this quality, this capacity. And I invite you to see this person in front of you, embodying, exemplifying this quality. And as they're in front of you, see them melting inwards into light so that they melt inwards and become a small sphere of intensely radiant light. And bring that sphere of intense, clear, luminous light over your head and let it descend down through central channel, the spinal cord, until it reaches the heart. And when it reaches the heart, it explodes through your body, mind, filling your entire body, mind, heart with that strength, that capacity, so that you now embody, are filled, illuminated by this strength. This strength, this capacity, this virtue is now part of you, an inherent part of your being. And now see yourself facing some life situation which might be challenging, and take a moment before you move into this situation to just feel your body. Notice the posture of your body with this new strength, this new capacity. And maybe you want to even exaggerate that posture so it really embodies this strength. This is now one of your great strengths. And anytime you want to reignite this strength, you just have to bring your body into this posture. And now see yourself moving into the world, facing a recurrent challenge or some situation which might have been challenging before, but embodying this strength, expressing this, facing this situation with your new strength. Notice how you respond, how you feel. How does it feel to live with and from this strength? Good. And when you're ready, see if you can maintain that posture, that strength, while bringing your awareness back to our community. Good. Is there anyone who'd like to share anything from that experience? These meditations often just silence people. And we don't have to do it, but if there's anyone who'd like to share, by all means do so. Would be a gift to us.
I'd like to. I'm in the dark
please,
here.
Jess. Yeah, you got dark.
Yeah.
You got dark.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you so much for bringing the practices in and the timing of the practices. It just really, it really grounded it for me. And there's something about the explosion at the heart that was really powerful. It was like a embodied paradox in a way of qualities. And I don't know, it helped the image of the person that wasn't really fitting so well. It helped it land in a way that was more about the quality than the person. And that was really helpful. So yeah, thank you.
Beautiful. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. Yeah, there's something about that that adds an impact to it. Yeah, beautiful. Well, you seem to be fading into the dark, Jess. I hope you don't disappear. Okay, so let's move on.
Karen Voorhees has her hand raised.
Sorry, I didn't see. Where?
Hi. Yes.
Karen, yes.
Yes. Yes, during the first exercise that you led us through, I realized that my assignment is to firm up my intention to reestablish my daily meditation technique, which had just crumbled under the assault of the pandemic and various other things. And I've been moving toward it the last week or so, but now I have a firm resolve. Tomorrow morning, I will get up at 5. I will tonight get everything ready so that when I wake up, I don't have to organize anything at 5 a.m. So that was my resolve at the beginning, the first exercise you put us through. And what came through for me during the one you led us through just now is the quality of pursuing the spiritual path to make the ego, the small ego, transparent to the Buddha nature. because I know what my project is. It's creative writing, and I've gone to a number of writers' workshops. And when somebody, for whatever reasons, savages something you've done, it can be horribly, just, you can feel like you've just been cut off at the knees. But when the ego is transparent, I can just sit there and let it blow through and resolve in the Buddha nature. And it doesn't, you know, when the ego becomes, it doesn't go away, but I think it becomes transparent.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a vast building that's just made of tiny wires. It's there, it's real, but everything, it's transparent to everything around it. And then the blasts of criticism or malice or whatever just blow right through it and don't shake it. So
beautiful. Yeah.
That's what I came up with.
Yeah, beautiful, Karen. Yes, you're echoing the words of Joseph Campbell, who said the goal is to become transparent to the transcendent.
Oh,
yeah.
I didn't know that was a Campbell quote. Beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. And Christine.
Hi, Roger.
Hi.
I realized the thing that I felt I am lacking to be more of a bodhisattva is courage, and that I hide behind my fears of being rejected or disappointed or in some way hurt or hurting others. So I just don't have the courage to push through that. So the second thing that you did kind of put me more in touch with, well, if I really try to come from my heart, that exploding place, you know, if I really try to come from a place of love, wouldn't that make all the other problems or difficulties kind of fade? So I was left with those two feelings, is that I need more courage, but I think the way of having more courage for me is to try to remember how to come from a loving place so that it softens some of maybe the edges that I'm more concerned about.
Yeah, beautiful. And in good theology is often very good psychology, and the traditional Christian idea would be perfect love casts out fear. And in contemporary psychology, we would say that love and fear are reciprocally inhibitory. Each inhibit one another. So to the extent, as you say, we are feeling love, to that extent, it inhibits fear. Oh, beautiful. You are giving good theology and good psychology. Thanks, Christine. Okay, so time flies. All right, moving on. Principle number 9. So we are called to do a lot of things simultaneously. We're called to help heal both the outer social global problems and their inner psychological and spiritual roots. We're called to develop ourselves so as to become effective instruments of service. And this means trying to wake up and grow up and develop our skills as social activists as much as we can. That's a lot. Can easily feel overwhelming. If only there was a way to do them all simultaneously. Well, fortunately there is. It's what the ancient practice of what was known as karma yoga, which is a form of what I call sacred service. And so our 9th principle is healing and awakening both is we want to engage in sacred service, healing and awakening both the world and ourselves simultaneously. And there are multiple forms of yoga, but karma yoga is the yoga which uses our work and action in the world as the instrument for our own spiritual maturation and healing. And it's a way of taking any activity and transforming it into an opportunity for learning and awakening, so that all life becomes a continuous yoga. And we can think of it and we can break it down into several steps, but let's simplify and let's break it into 8 steps. And the benefits of karma yoga come from doing each of these steps. So the first step is we're wanting to transform our activities and our work and our social activism into a yoga. And so the first thing, before beginning any major activity, whether it's, before beginning a project, or if you're getting in a car to drive somewhere before you turn on the ignition, is to stop for a moment. Just stop what you're doing. So you're not rushing into this. You're actually giving yourself a little moment to take some breaths. Give yourself the gift of a moment to become present and to reflect on what you're doing and why. Okay? So, for example, you get in the car before you turn on the ignition and burn rubber to get away. Stop and take 3 breaths. I'm willing to bet you that it won't be many days before about breath number 2, this thought arises, I don't have time for this. And if you don't have time for 3 breaths, take 6. You really need them. Give yourself that gift. Okay, so we stop and we look for our intention. Why are we doing this? What's it for? And any intention can be, it can be going to the groceries to get some food because I'm hungry, or it can be going to the grocery store so I can get some food and do my service work for the welfare and awakening of all. Same action, big difference in intention and the experiences it will evoke. So stop, set an intention. Third thing, offer what you're doing to a higher source. Traditionally, you offer it to God, but if it can be any transpersonal source, anything larger than the individual ego. And it's a way of becoming, as I think it was Karen said, becoming transparent to the transcendent, offering ourselves. So it's no longer an egocentric motivation. We're now doing it, we're offering it to something larger. Next step, number 4, attempt to do the activity impeccably. As do the activity as wholeheartedly and well as you can. And this strengthens capacities such as effort, commitment, willpower, skill, etc. 5, be mindful. Bring as much awareness as you can to each aspect of the activity and be aware of how you're feeling, how it's going, what you're doing, how other people are responding and reacting. And the 6th step, be aware of any reactivity you have. Because if you're doing a project which feels important to you, there will be reactivity. You will get attached to the outcome. And as you get attached to the outcome, you'll get these emotional responses. You'll get angry if someone gets in the way, or fearful that it's not going to turn out the way you want, or embarrassed that you're not looking good, or depressed if you give up hope. All these challenging emotions are feedback signals pointing to the attachment you have about the outcome being the way you have envisioned. And again, you can just offer the whole thing up. And we can learn from these emotional reactions. They're opportunities, painful emotions are opportunities for healing and growth. And we can work with them. If we get angry with someone that they're getting in our way, we can, you all have a bag of tricks for working with them. My favorite reflection is, if you're really angry with someone, you wish they were dead, be patient. They will be. and so will we. That probably won't seem so important. There are lots of things here. Step number 7, release attachment to the outcome. This is the key step of karma yoga that turns it into a yoga, because we are setting the most encompassing, highest intention we can. We're offering it to Brahman or God or a transpersonal source. We're doing it as impeccably as we can. And it's very hard to work really hard on idealistic actions and not get attached to the outcome. And that makes it egocentric again. So what turns it into a yoga is simultaneously, whenever we notice we're attached to things working out as the way our little ego thinks they should, letting go of those attachments. Then it becomes a strategic yoga. It's this which cuts through egocentricity. And often we think, oh, if I let go of my attachment, I won't be motivated, I won't work as hard. And that's a limiting belief. Because wonderful thing we discover is that we can trust ourselves. And if we let go of attachments, we have free up energy, become more empowered and more effective. At the end of the activity, next step, stop again. Give yourself time now to reflect and learn. After the activity, take some time to reflect and learn. What can you learn from this activity? What went well? What didn't? What could you do better? What did you learn about yourself, about your mind, about your attachments, etc.? There's this incredible learning opportunity. And when you've learned, then the final step is a paradoxical one. We offer whatever benefits have been gained from this activity to others for the welfare and awakening of all. And it seems kind of paradoxical. We're intending to give away the benefits or share them with all other people and conscious creatures. It's based on a very profound understanding of the way the mind works, because what we intend for others, we tend to experience and strengthen in ourselves. So we offer the benefits for the welfare and awakening of all. These are the steps of karma yoga. And this is the way we turn all our actions into an effective way of helping and healing and learning and growing and maturing and healing ourselves simultaneously. Okay. And I mistimed this. I was going to do a breakout group here, but I think what would be better is if we did, I was going to do a guided meditation, then a breakout group, but I think we can do it, given the time constraints. Let's do it as a guided meditation, then come back and share our insights with the whole group. Sorry, I was thinking 2 hours, it's so long. How am I going to fill this time? Well, somehow. So I invite you to take a few breaths and become centered. Relax. And I invite you to think of a major activity that you are going to be undertaking or that you do undertake. Anything that has, real significance for you. And I invite you to see yourself as you're in that situation and as you're just about to begin this activity. And see yourself stopping for a moment and just taking a few deep breaths. Become present. And then ask yourself, why are you doing this? What is it for? Really good to begin any undertaking with the question, what is this for? Knowing that you can choose your response and your intention. So what is this for? And I invite you, if it feels right, to consider doing it for the good of all people, all conscious creatures, and for your own learning and growth and healing and awakening. Or perhaps you want to encompass all this in the Bodhisattva aspiration, to do this in order to learn and grow and heal and awaken so as to become an optimal instrument for the welfare and awakening of all. And now offer this activity to a transpersonal source. And see yourself doing this activity as impeccably as you can. Bringing awareness, mindfulness to each aspect of the activity. And notice any reactions as you engage in this activity. Maybe there are thoughts that, oh, I can't do this, or I can't do it all, or there are anxieties or other feelings, other blocks and barriers that arise. All you have to do is bring awareness to them. And explore and learn from those reactions. And as you're working impeccably for this aspiration, let go attachment to the outcome. Let go attachment to your ego's idea of how it should turn out. If you want, just offer the outcome to God, a higher source, a transpersonal source. And at the end, stop and learn. Just take a moment to stop and reflect and learn. And then see yourself offering the benefits of whatever you've done for the welfare and awakening of all. And just feel the impact of that visualization. And if you wish to maintain some of that state, that experience, those insights as you bring your awareness back to our community, please do. Oh, beautiful. Would anyone like to share anything? Oh, Trudy.
Yeah, I'm somewhat reluctant to share, but what I'm doing is I lead a very small ladies discussion group. It's based loosely on some principles out of Integral, but that's really not my purpose. My purpose is to basically expand their perspectives so that they have a greater capacity to make sense of what's going on in our world. And how I started this, I belong to a women's group that has grown exponentially. So I initially offered it to them. This was before COVID. And I probably had, I'm going to say 15. And then we were meeting in my living room. And then when COVID hit, we had to go to Zoom. And when we went to Zoom, about half of them dropped out. And my initial reaction was like, oh God, no. You don't want to be make your available. You don't really want to learn this. And I had to give up on that. I had to let go of that. That you're either ready to hear this or you aren't. So I gave up my attachment to it. And what I find is that the few people that I do have are very appreciative. And I'm trying again to expand this. So what I've learned, it's damn near impossible to explain what integral is. So really, if I just talk with people in a common language, they get it. They absolutely get it. And they're intrigued and they're curious. So
beautiful.
I have to give up being limited by my own circumstances.
Yeah, thank you. Good lesson for us all. Thanks very much, Trudy. And you said you're trying to expand perspectives without it being noticed. Yes, you're a consciousness mole or an integral mole, working undercover to bring these perspectives to bear. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, it's for me, it's more like I want this group of women to have a better capacity for making wise decisions.
Yeah,
and to see things in a much wider perspective.
May it be so. Yeah. Okay, so we've gone through 9 of the 10 principles. We've explored karma yoga as a way of bringing all that the effective action requires of us into one ongoing practice, using our work in the world as our spiritual practice. And the final principle is related to service. The principle is that service serves us until the universe serves itself. Well, what's that mean? Well, our culture thinks of service as self-sacrifice. However, wisdom sees service as enlightened self-interest, because serving produces multiple benefits, beginning with what's called an immediate helpless high. And it cultivates benevolent qualities such as love and joy and generosity and selflessness. And gradually it unveils our true nature. And karma yoga selfless service, spiritual service, is one of many practices, along with meditation and therapy and a lot of others, which gradually help us recognize that we've lived our entire life suffering from a case of mistaken identity. And that we're not only more than we think, we're more than we dare think, and more than we even can think. And this is the central secret of life that the world's contemplative traditions point to. And once this deeper self, our truer nature, our true self, is glimpsed in both ourselves and others, so much changes. But having seen its magnificence, our own magnificence, what else could we want to do except help awaken ourselves and others to it? What else would be a worthy expression of who we really are, or a worthy offering to who others really are? And given the extent of needless suffering in the world, what could be more appropriate or satisfying than devoting ourselves to alleviating this suffering? And suddenly the Bodhisattva aspiration makes total sense, because this is simply what we want to do, most deeply want to do when we recognize who we are and who others are, and how much of the world's suffering stems from not recognizing this. How simple this is, how obvious, how beautiful. And when doing sacred service, we go deeper into ourselves in order to go more effectively out into the world, and we go out into the world in order to go deeper into ourselves. And we continue this cycle, inner and outer, until inner and outer become one. And then the universe learns and awakens and serves itself through us. Our world is in very, very deep trouble, but our world also rests in good hands, because actually it rests in yours. And I thank you for the work I know all of you are doing, and for the privilege of being with you and sharing in that work. Yeah. Yeah, we have just a few minutes. Would anyone like to share anything or ask a question? Are you putting a hand up, Jess, or you're just... Oh. No. Okay. Yeah, Phyllis.
First of all, thank you. More than I can say. And this was just an extraordinary night. So thank you, and thanks San Diego Integral for hosting you. All the practices were so meaningful. This last one, though, showed me the connection between attachments and humility in a way that I really hadn't quite gotten it before. And with that kind of new thought came a little bit more ease about entering into something that I'm about to enter into. And
beautiful.
And so I really thank you very, very much. And it was just extraordinary.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you, Phyllis. Yeah, good luck with what you're about to do. Yeah. And I realized, Tom, you wanted a few minutes at the end, or someone wanted a few minutes at the end to wrap. So we can either have a little minute more discussion or just end now, whatever you'd like, Tom or Eli.
Okay. Yeah, let me do the wrap, and then we're going to go into the social half hour or hour. So thank you very much, Roger. As usual, it was a comprehensive map of the possibilities of what we're evolving into, for some of us, aspirational. If people wanted more information on either yourself or your work, Roger, is there a website or a link that perhaps we could put in the chat?
Yes, it happens to be named drrogerwalsh.com.
Okay.
Which I find easy to remember.
Yeah, that's pretty easy. So maybe we can put that in the chat for people. And thank you again.
Oh, and I do want to put in a plug for our podcast, which has just been a total gift to it's Deep Transformation, Self-Society Spirit, and we've had incredible dialogues with a lot of people in the integral community and from around the world, all people doing incredible kinds of good work in the world and bringing real contemplative depth to both contemplative practices and to the issues of our time.
Okay, if you can get that in the chat, that'd be great, Roger. So a quick reminder for everyone is next month, we'll go on December 10th, we have John Kessler, who's at the conference, along with Roger. And so please reserve in order to be there. And remember, you can still make a donation on sandiegointegral.org. So we're moving into the chat segment now. And you can either ask questions, make observations. I wanted to call to attention, Eloy did an outstanding summary of this. And I know what I'm going to do is download it and read it occasionally to true myself up to see where I'm doing well with some of the 10 principles and where I need more work. So that can be, that's on the Google Doc link that's early in the chat that you can see above. So with that said, just feel free to unmute yourself to make comments or to ask a question.
Well, I have a question for Roger then. I was telling some friends about karma yoga, and they have a hard time getting through the karma part about the, they relate that to past misgivings and attachment of history and stuff like that. I was trying to explain to them that at least the way I understand it is the karma is the action.
Yeah.
Not necessarily, what we bring.
Yeah, you're right, Eloy. We have our culture is taken on a somewhat several misunderstandings about first the nature of karma, but also karma yoga. Karma basically means exactly what you said, action. So this is the yoga of action and work in the world. Yeah. So you probably have to decontaminate the term karma for them.
Maybe with that, just with the time, we can transition to our post-meeting discussions, which will just be more open-ended discussion amongst all of us. It doesn't have to center on our speaker. So if we imagine ourselves in the living room, chatting amongst ourselves.
It's funny, I'm left with the possibilities of what we're evolving into and what's perhaps aspirational, but I'm also humbled by the breadth of these possibilities that this is a tall list. And is anyone else feeling humbled by this?
I don't know, I'm feeling energized, kind of like you guys at the end of the WTF conference. Less head, more heart. And I'll let somebody else explain what that was for the people who didn't attend the WTF conference.
I've, since that conference, I've been playing with the karma yoga, and I'm struck by how rich it is and how hard it is. Like there's like immediate, and it feels like an immediate shift when I start the practice. But it doesn't take long for it to drift away. So just like, I guess, just like meditation or just like any other spiritual practice, it have to lean into it and develop more skill at it. But it does change things a lot. So I appreciate that.
Eloy, like Roger made reference to this as well, and I know that I really had it impressed upon me by listening and working with Dan Brown, but that the way that the practice can be slippery, Roger, you made a really nice reference there to, like, if the 3 breaths seems like too many, take 6. You know, there's the calling back to the purpose of it, you know, that karma yoga is the nature of being informed until you realize the total emptiness of that form. And so the reason for returning to the practice is for your own deepest well-being and the well-being of all. And Roger, you returned us to that 3 or 4 times today. I'm really grateful that pointing out. And I know that helps me a lot. So I just want to offer that encouragement. I know you've had lots of experience with these things, but you always return with a beginner's mind. I really appreciate that.
Come out wherever you are. Hi, I'm an Encinitas, and I found the reframing, just that reminder of how powerful reframing is. And I guess one of the things that is I've been hesitant about playing big or really identifying the next area of contribution I will make is staying healthy. It's like if I were to work at a refugee camp, I'm sorry, this is probably very minor to people, but how would I physically, the karma yoga, yes, I totally embrace that. I guess it's that physicality. So it's almost like I need a reframing of that for myself. Don't know if anybody else can relate to this, but staying physically vital and that aliveness and healthiness is at this stage in my life is really important. So I'm wanting in this experience to reframe that not knowing or that fear. How do I make this next contribution and stay physically? I mean, emotionally, yeah, okay. And spiritually, okay, but physically healthy and vital. Thank you for hearing me, allowing me to share.
Another thing I was struck by, Roger and everyone, is so I'm a practicing Buddhist, and how much this karma yoga informs Buddhism. Not only the way of the Bodhisattva, but in the lineage I'm in with the teachings of Thich Nhat Hanh that engage Buddhism. And the the difference that came to me in the karma yoga, that and this was just my own interpretation of engaged Buddhism, was that the engaged Buddhism was about specifically activism and doing those big things in the world. And what I'm seeing is that it's also doing the dishes and cleaning up after the dog and all that kind of stuff. With doing the karma yoga with those kinds of activities.
Mother Teresa had a great line: "We can't all do great acts. We can all do great acts with. We can all do small acts with great love."
Mm-hmm.
And self-care is just as important as care of others, because ultimately there's no difference anyway. But one of my breakthroughs, taking just like flossing my teeth. I have spent so much of my life resenting that I have to floss my teeth, every day, twice a day. But I was attending my social church, which is Unitarian Universalist, and they had invited a minister from a Black Muslim church in Richmond to come and speak to us. And he was a very, in integral terms, very amber, solid amber, very pre-modern traditional. And he was speaking to a group of very green church-going Unitarian Universalists. It was interesting to see how often it was just not connecting. But he said something that has helped me so much, that plugs right into the karma yoga, that when he gets up in the morning, every part of his ablutions is ritual in service to God, like washing his face. He would say a specific phrase, that in washing my face, I am cleaning myself so that I can appear. I forget the specifics, but it just grabbed me. And so I've made my own little ritual out of my morning ablutions with everything I'm doing, like washing my face. I'm keeping myself clean. In flossing my teeth, like flossing is the shadow work, getting under the gums, and so every piece of it, and I have to do, for the aging body, you have all these lotions and potions and things you have to do. There are a few more every year, but every one of them has some psychological statement. So I've turned this into a ritual, and that's it's offering this as an offering. So even that really piddly, mundane little piece of self-care becomes an offering, and it's just and it's just a joy, because it was such an unlikely inspiration. So I'm very grateful to that minister from that church. But yes, and I just repeating what was your Dar, what you were saying. I think I see no difference theoretically between taking good care of ourselves and caring for other people. So it's there's some, and in fact, I think we all know sometimes we have to put our own oxygen mask on first, or else we can't be of service to the people around us. So this is just part of the game, the divine game, I guess. So throw that into the pot.
I just wanted to respond to the comment on physical limitations. I know I've had a lot of physical limitations, and I've learned to sometimes it's frustrating because you want to do certain things and you have good intentions, but I've learned to just accept it and just think of myself as water. So if there's an obstacle, to just kind of redirect wherever it's taking me. And sometimes we want to do so much, and sometimes the thought of just having being a positive energy, just a positive presence, we don't give that enough credit, because I know if I just think, okay, well, maybe in this moment all I can be is like a positive energy, and I think, well, is that enough, right? But then when I think of others, I think, well, yeah, actually, sometimes just the silent person who's that groundedness and who's that presence and who listens and who doesn't judge and who's just, I don't know, sometimes it's just gives me a sense of safety and wholeness, just being in the presence of certain people. And and I think sometimes sometimes that's enough, and sometimes we're called to do more than that, but to just learn to like go with wherever we can go, like wherever we're taken. Just like think of myself as water. That tends to help.
I'm still reverberating from what Karen said about how you brush your teeth and floss. And it reminded me what I felt at the Sedona Integral Conference is if I stay mindful of we're always in ritual, I didn't think about it in terms of brushing my teeth, that it seems to add a sacred element and the intention trues up into something bigger than ourselves. And I had that feeling at the conference of this is all ritual and pointing towards the evolution we're undergoing. So thank you for that easy way of supplementing it, Karen. Flossing is never going to be the same ever again.
Yeah, the eyes, wiping the eyes, may I see clearly, unimpeded by my own, processes. May the brushing the teeth is how I chew into life. This is how I chew into life. Keep the cognitive materials clean and healthy, and then of course every single piece has is a metaphor for something I just do during the day. Cognitively, whether it's expressing myself or taking in, and so it's actually just ritual. Turning these into rituals. What a beautiful way to think of the conference. Since I was attending virtually, I wasn't able to travel. It was not practical for me to travel there, but yes, there is a ritual element of it, and I still have to say, Tom, I think the way you and Kim Barta ended it, made it just added that little cherry on top of the whole beautiful Sunday, ice cream Sunday of the weekend.
Can you describe it since you raised it twice?
Okay.
For people who weren't
just, I immediately, as soon as I was howling with laughter, I have to say, and I immediately jumped up and told my husband, and he laughed too. Well, I think, as I recall, Tom, you had invited each of the major presenters up to give a very short and capsule thing from their major, what we call a takeaway. And you saved Kim for the last one, and he got up, and there were you two guys, and you were holding this big phallic microphone, and holding it in between the two of you so that Kim could say his thing. But before he finished, you acted as if that's enough, Kim. You started to take the microphone away. So Kim Barta put his arm around Tom's shoulder and pulled him closer. And so like these two guys are wrestling for the microphone. I mean, it was really like a couple of big guys on the stage wrestling, and it could have been real. And Tom's pulling the microphone away and Kim's pulling it back so he can finish what he was saying. And I was so impressed at the time because Kim kept speaking in these lucid phrases, exactly just finishing. He was going to finish what he had to say, by golly. And then Tom finally wrestled the microphone away, stuck it below his belt. So it's like sticking up out of his belt. And then he kind of turns and faces Kim. Kim got down on his knees in front of Tom and put his mouth like 3 inches away from this big phallic microphone and said, "That's what we need here with Integral. And less head." And then he stood up and thumped Tom on the chest, "More heart." And then he got down on his knees again and said, "Less head, more heart." And I thought, wow, talk about grounding this in our bodies. I thought that was terrific. It was a wonderful conference, but that was, again, the cherry on top of that magnificent ice cream sundae. Thank you.
God, you remember more of it than I do.
Yeah, it could have been genuine. I mean, I think I presume you planned it ahead, but yeah, but it looked real while it was happening. The energy was real. It was a lot of fun. And that's a part thing too. I have to say, I am attached to having fun. You know, I'm willing to offer it up to, but I have to say one of the outcomes I am attached to is having fun with Integral.
You know, I often think that silly needs more of a prominent place. You know, we talk about laughter, but I'd like to see an in-depth look at silly. Which might be silly, but I still like it.
We're going to have to put some serious thought into that, Tom.
Well, that's my cue. As Tom knows, and Christine know in the past, I talked about the idea of serious seniors for silliness. I'm serious about that in a silly kind of way.
I didn't hear the whole thing, Larry. Say it again.
Oh, I said, you might remember in other settings, I had talked about starting a new movement, serious seniors for silliness, and being serious about it, but in a silly kind of way. So.
Awesome. I will interject here. I'll put on my my scholar's cap on and say, silly is cognate with the German selig, which means holy. So silliness, holiness, same root.
Can I add to that as well? Oh, sorry. Can I add to that as well? It makes me think of a Suzanne Cook-Reuter presentation about the fooling, the wise fool archetype. Does anyone else recall that one? Anyway, that was
that Cook-Reuter?
Yeah, she was great.
Similar theme. And I might add to just something that has come up with the 4 questions and the 10 principles. I find that, you know, I've heard a lot of this material before. I do listen to the podcast, and it's brilliant, Roger. So thank you.
Bless you.
We're renovating our house, and it's always in the background, like just whatever's. It's great. And so, like, I find it easier to take on. It's like a moving meditation, a life meditation of moment to moment, being present with what you're doing, having an intent, dropping the outcome. And when they're the bigger picture things that I probably think of more often. But what I do get stuck on is then bringing it back to the questions, not the questions, the other principles of not being, now's not the time to be small. And I find it easier with the small stuff. And then I suppose I don't know how to take it as, like, whenever like the first meditation, whenever I contemplate the bigger thing or what's mine to do, I get a bit lost with that. And maybe it's getting stuck in the strategy or getting stuck in our Terry Fallon's, you know, first do no harm, which I think from what I gather from integral theory is that that's probably more organic, that the higher up the spectrum you go is to do no harm. But I suppose it's that fear of doing no harm. Then, yeah, what's mine to do? I don't know. So day to day, brilliant. Bigger picture, that's where I get stuck. So that's just my passing comment on all that.
I would ask if there's a limiting belief behind in the lurking around there.
Great question. I don't think I have. Well, yeah, it's nothing. Obviously, it's shadow. I can't see it. I can't. Well, nothing comes to mind. That's probably. There is a fear of being being the type of person that others hang their shadows on. Like anyone in, and I suppose it's like the whole being a leader. You have to make some tough decisions, and people will, when you're in front of others, you know, you're there to receive the projections of everyone else. And I suppose it's sort of going, is there a way to minimize that in order to cut through what your intent is? Or like, it's just those type of dynamics. That's the bigger picture of it. I haven't really dissected it enough to, I don't think it was, I probably spoke before I have thought it through to a bunch of, taken up the time of a new group, being new to the group. But so I apologize. But yeah, so that's the, and I don't know if anyone else has that experience as a leader. Like,
yeah. And I don't, thank you very much for bringing that up. And yeah, I know that well. It's like, and I wonder if there's not a limiting belief that I can't hold those projections, because there is a way of, and I'm not saying I'm a master of it, but there is a way of receiving projections, but just not getting hooked by them as much. It's like they don't have to stick to us.
I look forward to mastering that art.
Yeah, let me know when you how to do it when you do. And but it is a skill one can learn. I know. I mean, I'm not as hooked as I used to be, but it's not. Yeah.
I suppose it's also like, sorry, Eric. Like also like how people like, I just think of politicians like Trump. Nothing sticks. Like, and maybe I'm thinking of an example for you guys. And maybe that's changed in the last, but like I just think of Australian politicians are the same. It's like the ones that so much gets thrown at them and nothing sticks, rightly or wrongly. Whereas I'd be scared of, anyway, but that's not. Sorry, Eric, you were going to say something?
No, I'm echoing where you're at, Kelly, so no worries. Yeah, I'm really drawn to this notion of not playing small, and I can see it from the individual perspective and limiting beliefs that I have. And then I just want to weave in also the community aspect of that as well, because I have found in my personal experience that if I try to play too big for the community that I'm in, then that somehow gets pulled down, that there's that magnetism of the cultural center of gravity. And how do we intentionally create developmental spaces where we bring out the best of each other? So Tom, when you were referencing Karen, and I really appreciated that you're flossing your teeth not just to floss your teeth, but there's something behind it. There's a real beauty in that, where I feel inspired, and then it shifts me. And and I just wonder how we as a community here, other communities that we're part of, really hold the higher possibilities. And when people are visionary, for instance, that we don't bring them down, or because sometimes it gets really hard for an individual to hold on their own. So Kelly, what you're describing, dealing with the shadows, and and it's easy for people who have a public profile to be projected upon, and that they're not metabolizing that on their own, that there's also a support structure underneath that can see them in their brighter, shining moments, and help boost that up, rather than also being part of the chorus of like, you're getting too big, the tall poppy syndrome, right?
So kind of a collective playing small, huh, Eric? Like the collective, not only is the collective pulling the individual down, but it's keeping itself down in that sense.
Eric, thank you. That brings up a question. There's a little bit of vulnerability to me saying this out loud in this group, but Roger, having you here is a real resource, and I want to tap you for this. I just was a guest on a podcast recently for the first time. And in integral terms, it was probably a fairly orange podcast. It was very progressive about, we can do this. How do we meet our challenges head on and get through them? And I'm working with kind of the reflection of, did I go a bit far afield in that dialogue? And in particular, now I've been invited to be on a second podcast. And this is a question that was up for me this morning, Eric. So you just really kind of hammered it into my chest. Like, really? Is this really your question? Because if so, maybe open your mouth. So I wonder, Roger, what you might say. I feel like my natural disposition is to play large. I really struggle right up against, in my conception of the contextualization of things, as you suggested earlier on, is really the seeing the world through the lens of humanity has swallowed the globe, and this is a movement out of orange and into green. This is a third person rational, modern center of gravity, globe affecting the global condition, moving to a postmodern effect. And it's an integrative collective move that really re-inhabits the biosphere. It reacquaints ourselves with one another, nation to nation, religion to religion, culture to culture, and is in a sense a profound wholesale reinvention. I think of this as, in my own cosmology, just says this is returning us to 11,000 BC, before, when we moved into the concrete tier collective mode. We're now moving into the subtle tier collective mode. And so I really, my deep ethos in all of this is the fact that we use money, which inherently drives us to abstract value away from the actual natural values of clean air and water and healthy relationship. And like my own playing big, it really stretches all of the things that I have to otherwise live into on a day-to-day basis, and a lot of the fundamental assumptions that everybody around me takes for granted most of the time, and I often feel crazy when I start to question. And so how do we go into these conversations? Again, this podcast host is going to be a lot, probably green orange, with some integral in the audience, but probably a lot on that threshold. How do I rein myself in without surrendering what I mean? Like there seems to be real skillfulness in speaking to your audience, and I practice with that every day. But would you offer, or anyone really that has any sense of reflection on this? I'd really appreciate it.
Anyone going to step in? I can comment, but if there's a lot of wisdom in this group.
I'll just throw in a metaphor, because this comes up with me a lot too. Trying to shape my plug to fit whatever this socket is, and just trying to have that as part of my mindfulness moving into conversation. So socket and plug, and trying to shape how I'm putting myself out there. That's my metaphor.
Yeah, to Karen's point, in business as a consultant, I worked with a lot of orange, as you can imagine, and a fair amount of green too. And from an integral perspective, what it was about is appealing to their orange and their green, but just coming from an integrally informed perspective in doing that. So it wasn't like you had to be integral with them, at least not in a way that would be abrupt or distracting or even upsetting to them. If I was really coming from integral and not being sensitive to where they are, they would have a problem with it. I know that. Kabir, I think you know enough about what I'm talking about already, and I'm suggesting maybe just trust yourself and kind of just feel into that space and realize that you're really just trying to relate to orange and green. And if you're steeped enough in your integrality, that'll take care of itself. You won't have to worry about, am I coming from integral? But just trying to engage them where they are.
Can I add to that too, Larry? I agree. I probably don't have any amount of experience as other people here, but I working our local council, and in an organisation that ranges from any conversation I have in a would be to find a healthy translation of any altitude. So obviously always sort of headed to bring peace together. I've spoken in a podcast before, so to not be, yeah, my goal is always just to ever touch on the values of those people who aren't present sometimes. Like if I'm in a heavy orange room, it's like, yeah, but that green might value some of this, might be a good idea. Anyway, that's going aside, but yeah, that's in addition to what Larry said. So yeah, anyway, thanks. Roger, do you have more? Or anyone else?
Well, firstly, to agree with what you and Larry have said, particularly the emphasis on trusting oneself, which you emphasized, Larry, and to acknowledge that this capacity to speak to each person. Muhammad said it well. He said, "Speak to each person according to their capacity for understanding," and that's what I think Larry was pointing to. And each of the responses being pointing to, and it is an art. It's a skill, and probably we'll be learning it for the rest of our lives. And at first, it's a conscious reflection on, okay, what do they say, etc. But I would encourage looking at what limiting beliefs there are there. And you've done a lot of work with limiting beliefs, Kabir, because we've both been schooled in this with Dan Brown. So I hear a limiting belief that you may not be able to do this. And I assume that if you just feel, if in each moment you feel into your experiences, you know well how to do, that your inner wisdom will guide you in the moment, and you'll know, you'll just feel into it. It's an intuitive thing. So I think I'm largely seconding what's already been said so very nicely.
Yeah, Kabir, I'm wondering out loud here, something that enabled me to be very effective at engaging orange and green in business is the orange part of my life. Those were great years. I was very competent as a developmentalist and a trainer, consultant, coach in business, whatnot. I was really good at orange. This is before I opened into green even, and certainly integral. And so I have a lot of memory, a lot of history of how orange happens and how it happens effectively, how it happens ineffectively, and all that. So I'm wondering, Kabir, for yourself, do you have much of that you can draw from your own orange experience in the world?
Larry, I mean, thank you everyone for these really rich reflections, and it's very helpful. And yeah, Larry, the thing I would say to that, and I agree, I appreciate you pointing to that. I'm kind of just creating the image in my mind of your experience of orange and being really competent. My actually competency in orange probably didn't actually come online until I had passed that as my center of gravity. And so, yeah, I do, but I really appreciate you pointing to that. And I'm encouraged to just look into my own day-to-day activity today and yesterday and tomorrow and see, like, where is the orange proficiency? Where is the green proficiency? If that's my assumption of the audience, yeah, I can really look to my own lessons in real time and see between now and Friday, what can I learn about, what do I actually know about orange and green that might be skillful for others. So that's really insightful. Thank you.
So Kabir, I'm wondering, I just want to pin you so I can see you a little bit better here than in the gallery. And I'm just wondering, Kabir, it's great to see you. It's been many years. Yeah. So I'm wondering how we're meeting you in this moment with the kinds of things that have been said. I'm imagining, projecting for myself that there's perhaps more behind the question. And I'm just wondering, yeah, if there's another level that would be, useful to include.
I'm happy to reflect on that, Eric, and thank you. It's nice to see you too. And it's really, I mean, there's a new identity. I'm at a developmental place in my own life where there's a grow or die moment, and I'm really leaned into the excitement and the possibility and the transformative quality of that. And this being on podcasts represents a kind of coming out, and in a way where much of the early part of my life had me very afraid of being seen because of the arrogance and the aggressiveness that I had been, learned into. And so I was unsafe to be in front of others. And so there's this, that's had many years of calming. And the experience that I'm having, to speak directly to your question, in this room now, with this group of people, is a lot of generous seeing and encouragement. That the one comment a couple of times about trust in the self, I noticed that just the slightest little grab of, but I do. And so there's a humility that says, like, take in that reflection of trust the self. And at the same time, I want to give voice to what I hope is a practice of wisdom that I'm bringing here, is like, there's so much potential just in meeting myself in a moment of meditation, in meeting you in this moment, in meeting a room full of people together. There's so much potential always that a deep value for me is never letting go of the aspirational sense of how much is possible in those moments. And then the silly, joyful, playful, celebratory humilities, we're always going to miss 90% of it, or 1,000% of it, or 1,000,000% of it. But we're going to give what we can when we get there. And so my bringing this question up in this room is really about, like, gosh, what an opportunity. This sacred space, energy that we've built here together tonight. I can suck some of that through the straw of my heart to carry it forward and bring it, some drop of it as an offering to whatever is going to happen on Friday. That's a sacred gift, and I hope that I can do any part of that.
I'd like to
Really touched.
offer, Kabir, just briefly, I'd like to offer to you that this is my fourth, I think, SDI group, and I've heard you speak, and I just wanted to let you know that I've been impressed emotionally, like thinking and feeling with things that you've said. And so I think that I think in terms of like the common ground that the levels have is logic, and then some care, the care that you show, and the intelligence that you show. I guess I don't know, if I were you, I'd probably not worry about it. So I just want to offer you that.
Thank you. Yeah, that threshold of worry and ease, I'll probably be living in that wisdom question the rest of this life for sure. Till I get over those limiting beliefs that says I can't realize full Buddhahood right now. I think I'm about to.
Seems like we're always reminded it is about community. The rest is all window dressing. So it does feel good. Somebody asked in the chat, what's orange and green? Yeah, good, Eli. It's a developmental perspective, specifically comes out of spiral dynamics. So orange would be modernism and green would be postmodernism, to say it briefly, in their worldviews.
Yeah, Darren, we have a lot of resources at that link. So there's a video, a couple of documents, and names of books and things like that. So I think there's one quick 5-minute video you can watch that'll give you an overview.
We come into a pause. We're 44 minutes into it.
Yeah, if I may say one thing before we pause, just since you're still here with us, Roger, just I have such deep appreciation. It's like, yeah, you've been such an influence on my life. And I pulled out my, seeing you at the WTF the other day, and then pulled out my integral spirituality or essential spirituality book from years ago. I had a date written in there. It's quite a long time, but I looked at all my underlines and so forth, and it's like, wow. And I just want to deeply appreciate you for what you've offered and, what you've said here. I've heard your talk a number of times, but I'm still moved each time that I hear that and inspired to show up in a better way. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much, Eric. And yeah, that's beautiful. That's inspiring to me. I love that, inspired to show up in a better way. May it be so for you and me and all of us. And yeah, thank you all for this. It's so beautiful to see this community. I think I'm gonna sit in and some more. So what a wonderful community. Thank you so much.
You're always welcome.
Yeah, feel free to join us, Roger, as we have other speakers. We love your input and your wisdom. So feel free to join us whenever you want.
This is a little side note. I want to thank you for your friendship with Terry Patton and being there with him in his final days and stuff. That was huge. So
I was, for those of you who know Terry, you will understand that was my privilege. And boy, was he an inspiration. To see someone live and die their values there. Yeah, very inspiring.
Okay, a good place then.
Tom, I silenced my mic, but I said while we're waxing into gratitude, I wanted to acknowledge you and Eloy and all the other people behind the scenes that are really keeping this going and just building such an incredible ball of energy. This thing that people are reflecting on is really due to this seed core of persistent consistency and intention. And it's really just
and a lot of sustained hard work. Thank you.
We're just doing our karma yoga here.
Thank you, Kabir. It's an honor to serve. So we'll see everybody next month. Watch for so we meet the second Saturday every month, but watch for the fourth Saturday of every month because we're trying to make European friendly times. The fourth Saturday will be 10 o'clock in the morning Pacific Standard Time. So the Europeans don't have to stay up till 1 o'clock. And at the conference, I was able to get commitments from Steve McIntosh, Layman Pascal, Jeremy Johnson again is going to revisit us. Kim Botter's coming back for another show. And Ben Seganti's coming. So I made them all offers they couldn't refuse. So much love to everyone. We'll see you next month.
For further information, including upcoming events, resources, links to our Facebook and Meetup pages, and our fabulous donate button, please visit our website at sandiegointegral.org. Donations are greatly appreciated and help us to continue to provide information and connection within the integral community.